So lately, I've been catching myself noticing the same thing over and over again. Anytime race comes up online, or history, or diversity, or accountability, there's this response that feels almost automatic now. I'm tired of white guilt. You'll hear it from influencers, you'll hear it from commentators, and you'll even hear it from politicians too. Not in those exact same words, but in the same spirit. Take people like JD Vance. They have gone on record saying things like, "You don't have to apologize for being white anymore."
In the United States of America, you don't have to apologize for being white anymore.
And every time I hear that, I pause, because I'm always left wondering, what is it that people think they're being asked to apologize for? The way this gets framed, it sounds like white Americans are constantly being blamed or punished just for existing, like there's some invisible pressure on them that they never agreed to carry. But when I step back and look at how things actually work in this country, who's protected, who gets grace, who gets the benefit of the doubt, that framing just doesn't line up with reality. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video. Not to attack anyone, not to shame anyone, not to blame anyone, but to ask a simple question that doesn't get asked enough. How did discomfort start getting confused with victimhood? Before I go any further, I want to be really clear about something. This isn't about pretending white people don't struggle. They do. Plenty of white Americans deal with poverty, trauma, addiction, job loss. All of that is real. The issue isn't whether hardship exists. The issue is how easily hardship gets framed as victimhood, because being uncomfortable isn't the same thing as being oppressed. And that's the conversation that usually goes sideways.
All right, this might hurt some feelings, but whatever. I was just scrolling through my feed and I saw a couple of posts about how white people have no culture. And I'm just over this white guilt, white shame type stuff. I'm not advocating for white supremacy. I'm just advocating the end of white silence and the end of white guilt and the end of white shame, because our culture participated in nothing that your culture hadn't participated in previously. We didn't start slavery, but we damn sure ended it. And the only place that slavery still exists are in people of color societies in Africa and the Middle East. The Vikings figured out how to circumnavigate the globe before the Islamic world ever figured out how to get their feet wet. It wasn't us that was going into Africa and pulling the slaves out. It was other Africans grabbing them and enslaving them. We invented democracy. We invented the constitutional republic. The bubonic plague wiped out half of Europe. And what did we do? We got together and discovered Western medicine and inoculations and vaccines. I'm not saying that we're better than you, but we're damn sure not worse. There are 4 major ethnic groups in this planet. There are black people, white people, Asian people, and Hispanic people. And we are the smallest. And we are the only group that you're demanding shut up. And because we're not doing it anymore, you're just going to scream racist louder and louder and louder. And we are done caring. We are not ashamed of who we are. We are not better than you, but we're damn sure no worse.
When people say they're tired of white guilt, what they're usually reacting to isn't actual punishment. It's discomfort. Discomfort with certain conversations. Discomfort with history being talked about honestly. And I get why that feels unsettling. If you grow up in a society where your perspective is treated as the default, then any challenge to that can feel personal, even if nothing is actively being taken away from you. But here's the question that keeps coming back for me. When did being challenged start meaning you're being victimized? Victimhood implies something systemic. It implies institutions working against you. And when you look at how the system actually responds to white Americans, that claim doesn't really hold up.
White people in this country have been pressured and guilted and lied about to an extreme that is best seen on a Cinnabon video. We'll get to that in a second. But think about how many times you've heard that as a white person, you are privileged, you have white privilege, and that you're a racist, and that you're a nationalist, and that you're a Nazi. You know, you can only take that language so many times until you sit and say, I'm going to fight back. There's only so many times you could be punched in the face until you put up a defense, and that defense is a hard offense. It's very simple what we want as Americans. It's not a hard concept. We've been taking in too many people for way too long. It's been decades and decades and decades of mass immigration, both legal and illegal. We've had to turn a blind eye to this. We've had to pretend like we want to deal with people who don't speak English. We've had to pretend like we've got to deal with the fact that when you walk into the emergency room, you look at people who look like they're from the third world, and you got to wait in line on something that you should be at the front of the line for. We're tired of going into our classrooms with our kid in the beginning of the school year and be like, where did all these people people come from. And why do you need 4 extra teachers to be teaching these kids? Oh, because they need ESL. We're tired of the cost. We're tired of it all. We're tired of our jobs being taken. We're tired of hearing that you can't get a job because you don't speak Spanish. That's it. This is our country. If you don't like it, get out. If you don't want to mesh with us and speak the language and enjoy the culture and embrace God, get out. We're tired of it.
What really made this click for me was realizing that a lot of this discomfort isn't about the past. It's not about slavery or ancestors or history textbooks, even though that does get brought up a lot too. The real discomfort is accountability in the present, especially accountability for racism that still exists right now. Because the same people who say they're tired of white guilt are often very passionate about free speech. They'll talk about how people should be able to say what they want, how this is America, and how everyone's too sensitive. But the moment someone says something openly racist and faces consequences, the tone changes completely. Suddenly it's cancel culture. Suddenly the punishment is too extreme. And that's where the contradiction shows up.
You see, the problem for them is everybody's watching this and we all see what's going on. I'm being persecuted for a law that does not exist. They're throwing bullshit charges at me to try to discourage me, to try to make me silence myself. Not gonna happen. It's not illegal to say, look at this guy harassing my community behind me. Look at this guy causing an issue in my community. He's chimping out. Call him a hard R and say, get the fuck away from me. In fact, get out of my neighborhood. That's not illegal. You know what it is? It's frowned upon to the people who want to keep us silent long enough to where we just go extinct. They know that white people are a threat to this system that they have going today. They don't want us to rise up again. I won't give up. Keep it coming. I'm gonna keep speaking my fucking mind.
Free speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. It never has. And I think this is where the conversation either breaks down or gets intentionally distorted. Because freedom of speech does not mean you can just walk outside, say the N-word in public, and expect nothing to happen. That's never been how free speech worked. Free speech protects you from the government throwing you in jail for your opinions. It does not protect you from social consequences. It does not guarantee your job. It does not require platforms to keep paying you. And it does not mean people have to be okay with what you said. So when someone says something openly racist, faces backlash, and then immediately claims they're being oppressed, I always stop and ask, oppressed by who? Because what they're actually reacting to isn't censorship. It's accountability.
You would not have to feel white guilt if y'all would fix what you did. You meaning your ancestors. If white people collectively would sit down and try to at least try to reverse the centuries and centuries and centuries of colonialism, bigotry, and racism, you would not have to feel guilty anymore. Problem solved. Because that's really why we're in this mess to begin with. Because a selective group of white people cannot bear to feel guilty anymore. They cannot feel the white guilt. They can't handle the white guilt. You aren't your ancestors, but you are burdened with the responsibility to fix what they did. But of course, that would mean having to share your spot at the top with everyone else, which again is not acceptable because y'all haven't known anything else. Because y'all keep running from history instead of facing it, we will continue to ride this oppression roller coaster until y'all become the minority. Because it is inevitable. It will happen. Desperately trying to ignore centuries of colonialism, bigotry, and racism isn't going to just make it go away. I don't care how many immigrants you try to deport. I don't care how many black people you try to kick out of your jobs and schools. I don't care how many Black History Months you try to cancel. White supremacy is not sustainable. It's not going to last forever. Y'all are already the global minority.
Nobody in their right mind is confused about the N-word. Nobody is unclear about its history. So when someone uses it publicly to get a reaction and then claims victimhood because people responded in a bad way, that tells you everything. They're not defending a principle. They're resisting responsibility. And once you see that, the rest of this conversation starts to make sense.
When you come speaking the truth about certain things, if you're raising racial awareness, let's say, if you are, heaven forbid, pro-white or a pro-white voice out there, which I am, which I always will be and will always influence my content no matter what it is, they will try to keep you down.
You'll often hear people ask, why should I be held responsible for what my ancestors did? But that question misses the point. Nobody is asking you to personally apologize for slavery. What people are actually asking is whether you're willing to acknowledge that the systems created during that time didn't just vanish. They changed form. That's not guilt. That's an observation. And when that observation gets rejected outright, the conversation can't move forward.
When someone says all white people are racist, they're not saying all white people are bad. They're saying all white people are subject to the sociological and psychological conditioning of society where racism is a fundamental systemic issue. They're saying all white people suffer from the sociological phenomenon of living in a world, in a country where racism, systemic racism, is a fundamental thing that makes that society exist. That means as white people, we have subconscious processes and behaviors that come out as a direct result of that. Behaviors that actively cause harm to other people, behaviors we need to become aware of, mindsets we need to work on.
You can see how this plays out when racism shows up in public. We've all seen the videos, someone gets caught on camera saying the N-word, or they go on a racist rant, the clip spreads, people react, and there's backlash. But very quickly, the focus shifts. Instead of talking about the harm that was done, people start paying attention to the person who said it. Whether they lost their job, whether their life is ruined, whether the internet went too far. And I think it's worth asking why sympathy moves so fast in that direction. Why does concern shift away from the people who were targeted and toward the person who caused the harm? We've seen this cycle enough times that it's hard to ignore. And then the donation pages start to appear. People rally around someone who has just publicly expressed racism, and at that point, the story stops being about what was said and becomes about protecting the comfort of the person who said it. In America, racism might cost you embarrassment, but it rarely costs you protection. And if white Americans were truly victims of the system, that wouldn't just be the case. Victims don't usually get that level of grace by default, but people who are protected do. The same dynamic shows up online. There are entire channels and political brands built around the idea that white identity is under attack. They frame equality as loss and accountability as discrimination. And when platforms decide they don't want to monetize that content anymore, the narrative flips immediately.
They try to defame you, they try to take away your platform. When they can't take away your platform or get you banned, then they will take away your means of funding the project. They will demonetize you so that you cannot make the money that's necessary to continue putting out the content.
Now it's censorship. Now they're being silenced. Now they're the victims again. But losing monetization isn't oppression. It's a business decision, a decision that many creators deal with all the time without sympathy or support. So when you step back and look at the pattern, a question starts to form. Why does white victimhood get treated as credible and urgent, while black victimhood gets treated like an exaggeration? Why is it that when white Americans claim harm, the system responds with empathy, but when black Americans point out systemic inequality, they're told to stop playing the victim? That simple contrast tells us this conversation isn't really about fairness. It's about comfort. White America isn't under siege. What's happening is that long-standing dominance is finally being questioned, and that feels threatening to people who are not used to being questioned at all. In a country where white Americans hold the most power, most wealth, and most institutional protection, why do the loudest claims of victimhood keep coming from them? I actually unpacked the answer to that question more in my last video, especially how this shows up time and time again in media and politics. So if this topic matters to you, I think you'll appreciate the last video I worked on. Until then, see you guys in the next one. I'm out.